Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for today's meetup. On today's agenda, Scott and Allison will be providing a comprehensive citizen problem reporting solution. As a reminder, we'll be recording and posting this meetup on meetups.com shortly after the presentation. And during the meetup, if you'd like to make comments or chat with other participants, then please use the chat panel. However, if you'd like to submit a question for the team to answer, then please submit it through the Q&A panel. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Scott.
Okay, thanks, Heather, and thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. Today, Allison and I wanted to talk about the work we've been doing to develop a comprehensive citizen problem reporting solution. And we're going to share with you today some things that you can take advantage of immediately, and also communicate with you some of the work we're doing later this year so you can start to use the plans we have for this problem reporter solution to kind of organize your work in your respective communities and collaborate with us if you'd like. Before we dive into, okay, let's get going. But before we dive in, so a couple topics I wanted to cover today. One is I wanted to take a minute to summarize the March 2017 release and just give everyone on the call today and the meetup a chance to ask questions about the work we've shipped in the March 2017 release, and then dive into our primary topic, which is the comprehensive problem reporting solution. So for those of you that aren't familiar, earlier this month, we did ship an update to the ArcGIS for Local Government solution, and I just wanted to summarize a few of the key things that are available in that release. The first thing you'll notice is that we have moved the ArcMap-based pre-incident planning solution to mature support and replaced it with a collection of web app builder and collector for ArcGIS configurations to support the fire pre-incident planning workflow. At the same time, we also released a new offering for law enforcement that's similar to pre-incident planning, but it's organized around tactical operation plans that law enforcement organizations develop for special operations. We've been actively working with some folks in the Bay Area on a participatory budgeting solution, and that's a new offering that's available to help you during your capital project planning and capital project budgeting initiatives. You'll also notice that there's a whole host of enhancements to existing solution offerings and an updated information model. And all of that information is summarized in detail on the solution site and specifically on the What's New page. So if we drill in here to the What's New page, for those of you that aren't familiar, you'll see all the details for those different offerings I talked about. And you'll see even the enhancements that I summarized on the previous slide outlined here as well too. So it was a pretty major release, and there's a lot of new content there for the public safety community, some enhancements to existing offerings for land records and planning agencies, and even some new offerings for public works in the area of budgeting and mosquito control. So if you have any questions about those offerings, certainly don't hesitate to ask any one of us on the team, and we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have on those offerings. You'll also notice that in this release, we continue to add additional solution offerings to the ArcGIS Solutions Deployment Tool. And so you can quickly now deploy floodplain inquiry, snowcop, and the fire hydrant inspection solutions we have with the ArcGIS Solutions Deployment Tool, and we'll talk more about that today. So let's go back and just see, Heather, are there any questions that may have come in on the, or maybe I'll just take a minute to stop and see if anyone does have any questions on the March release before we move on to the content that we have prepared today?
So far, there's no questions regarding the release.
Okay. Well, if anyone does have any questions, certainly we'd be glad to answer them later on today. I just wanted to take a few minutes to kick off to really talk about the new offering we have. So let's just really then change our focus to the primary intent of our meetup today, and that is the Citizen Problem Reporter solution. And several years ago, we noticed that the communities were really struggling to provide kind of more comprehensive problem reporting solutions. And we had seen, as we looked across the market, at least in the local government space, a great deal of offerings and everything that ranged the gamut from homegrown, custom-built applications where users would have to type in the location of their problem to commercial off-the-shelf applications like SeeClickFix and CitySourced, and even some open source work and creative work that some cities have done with things like Instagram. Years ago, we had done a custom JavaScript application called Citizen Service Request that you'll see here in the lower left corner, and that was really to kind of provide an early pattern for problem reporting. But we wanted to take kind of all of the best practices that we saw out there in the market and begin to build it into an offering that was available with ArcGIS and was easier to deploy and maintain for users in our community. So as we looked at the solutions that were in this space, what we saw is there were a lot of point-based solutions that were really organized around maybe reporting a pothole or reporting graffiti, but we didn't see a whole lot of configurable offerings that were flexible based on the content you were trying to collect. One of the challenges we've heard from many people is how do you handle the overlapping jurisdictions and kind of the wicked web of responsibilities that we run into at a local level, and ultimately how do you mask that from the constituent who's reporting the problem in your community. We ultimately, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today, wanted to make sure that we could provide and ultimately connect the citizen to the operations of a government organization and ultimately provide a comprehensive workflow that had the maximum amount of impact on the internal workflows. We wanted the solution to be flexible so it could be rapidly deployed. The other thing we saw is that so many communities allowed anonymous access. Some wanted to provide more secure access, like with social media credentials and other types of identity. And ultimately, we also wanted to get to a point where the knowledge workers in your organization or field workers could also use these solutions to report problems too. So you had kind of a single channel to ingest the reports and then ultimately take action on them. And the other thing that we saw kind of throughout most of the offerings that were in the marketplace at the time is there weren't very many map-based workflows. There were a lot of examples of applications where users had to very strongly prescribe the location of the problem that was being reported, and in many cases hardwire it up to an address even though it may be in a vacant field or somewhere along a road that didn't necessarily have an address associated with it. And so we wanted to be flexible enough and leverage geography as kind of a unifying principle with the problem reporting solution. So the result is there, about 3 years ago, we released 2 ArcGIS Online crowdsourcing applications, and these are group application templates. So sometimes it's a little hard to find, but the Crowdsource Reporter and Crowdsource Manager group application templates were really developed and designed to support these problem reporting workflows. The first application I'll start with is Crowdsource Reporter, and that's a configurable application template that allows users to submit the problems or observations. So it's really designed for folks outside your organization who are reporting problems, and it's optimized for smartphones and responsively designed so you can use it on a smartphone, tablet, or desktop. And what that does is really make it easy for you guys to deploy a single application that can be used by a whole diverse number of people in your community on lots of different devices. So the reporter application really is the foundation for that kind of citizen engagement workflow. And there's a complementary application called Crowdsource Manager. And what Crowdsource Manager allows you to do is essentially begin to triage and take action on those reports. So it's designed for folks inside your organization. That may be a call taker, maybe an operations manager, or someone inside your organization who's going to be reviewing those requests for service or those problems that are reported, and begin to triage them and allow and kind of moderate how action's being taken throughout your organization. So the Crowdsource Reporter and Crowdsource Manager applications are really the foundation for these citizen problem reporter solutions. And what we did then is develop a set of configurations for you that we call Citizen Problem Reporter. And what the Citizen Problem Reporter solution does is really take those core apps that are delivered in ArcGIS Online and skin them for a specific kind of 311 citizen service request style workflow that we see in many cities and counties across the country. And we've seen several real-life implementations of these applications pop up throughout the community. The first on the upper left here is an example of the work that the city of Marshfield's done in their new geo-reporting system. And essentially that's allowed the city to go from a completely manual paper-based workflow to an automated workflow that's sending out notifications to users when sending out notifications to folks inside the organization when a problem is reported. We've also seen more specific implementations like this Graffiti Busters application that Riverside deployed, and the County of Riverside is using this to help just report really specific incidents of graffiti in the unincorporated areas of the community. And then finally, another good example for you to reference is the DuPage County, Illinois. And those guys have done a really good job configuring and skinning the citizen problem reporter solution to be a problem reporting example or implementation in their community. And they've gotten into this really neat cadence where they're kind of launching a new problem report on a regular basis, and then they have a nice landing page where users can come and learn more about the program and more about the application, and then ultimately begin to take advantage of it in their community as a whole. So let's take a look at the citizen problem reporter solution, and then talk about, maybe take some questions on specific functionality that's available. So I'm going to jump out here, and I'm going to start with the citizen problem reporter solution. And as I mentioned, this is a configuration of Crowdsource Reporter that's optimized for these kind of traditional problem reporting workflows. And this application initially looks a little odd here on a full screen browser because, as I mentioned, it's really designed for these workflows. Let me just make this a little smaller. It's designed for these workflows that are really on a smartphone device. So this is really the primary way you'll use this application. So imagine I'm on a smartphone out in the field and I observe maybe graffiti or some blight in the community, and I want to come in and report that. So as a user, I can come in and proceed as a guest. If I had social media credentials configured, I could log in with those credentials as well too. Or if maybe I'm a field worker in the organization, I can sign in with my ArcGIS credentials. But let's go ahead and proceed as a guest. Once I log in, you'll see here that there's a whole series of different problem report types that are presented to me. And all of this is configurable depending on the specific problems you'd like to engage the community with. At any point in time, I can dig in a little deeper here, and let's take a look maybe at blight complaints in the community. You'll see all of the existing reports that have come in a list here, what type of report it is, and whether or not there's a specific comment on it or a specific vote on it. At any given time, I can drill in and look at the details for that report. I can even see where it's been submitted. In this case, one was submitted in Atlanta with the Try It Live application. So it's a real simple way for me to see not only where the report, if there were photos attached with it. And as I mentioned, one of the fundamental concepts with this application we wanted to promote is we wanted to help local government organizations minimize the number of duplicative reports. And so in this case, you can see that the first thing I'm presented with is all of the existing reports in that community. If I wanted to kind of take a map-based view of that, I could see it. But rather than having duplicate reports, what I can do is pick on any existing report. I can promote or like that report, and I can even comment on this report. This graffiti, oops, problem still exists. Please. So the idea here is that you guys can, citizens can use this to continue to promote the importance of these problems and not reduce really the number of duplicative reports you may have in the same area. So that's, the citizen problem reporter solution and kind of how you can review existing reports and maybe add additional details on existing reports. But the primary function really of citizen problem reporter is to submit those new reports. So in this case, I'm going to go in and submit a new blight complaint. I did not see my problem in the list that we just looked at, and what I'd like to do now is just go ahead and submit a new report. So in this case, I'm going to report an abandoned vehicle. Abandoned vehicle in backyard. Put in some required information. You guys can control exactly what is required, the date of that report, any photos I may have taken. If I was in Naperville, Illinois, I could use my current location to identify the location of that report. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and click on the map because we aren't in Naperville, and then hit report it. And so in just a few simple steps, I can quickly go in and report a new problem. And if I were to come back out here to the main list, you'll see there was that report we just submitted, and real simple, straightforward way for me to see that information and really capture that information as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, if I were to sign in with my social media credentials or maybe my ArcGIS credentials, I would actually see all of the reports I submitted and the status of those reports. But in this case, I just signed in as an anonymous user, and so I don't get to see that information. But that's Citizen Problem Reporter. The idea is a real focused application that allows the general public within your community to identify reports that have already been submitted, maybe comment on those existing reports, or ultimately submit new reports so you can begin to take action on them. Now, what I'd like to do is just pivot a bit, and let me go ahead and refresh this and talk a little bit about the complementary application that goes along with that, and that is Citizen Problem Manager. So as I mentioned, Citizen Problem Manager is really a complementary app to the Problem Reporter application, and it's designed to help folks within your organization begin to triage and take action on these reports. So it's very much a dashboard that's set up for people inside your organization. I'm using the Try It Live, but this is typically a secure application that you'd sign into, and it would be exposed to only individuals within your organization, and they could then see the reports that came in. So we're going to go ahead and drill into the blight issues that were reported and begin to review them and take action on them. So you can see here, here's the report we just submitted with Citizen Problem Reporter, and if I click on that on the table, I can get additional information about that report. I can see where the report was submitted, the details of that report, and if there were any comments, I'd see those as well too. I'd also see here if I were to have submitted a photo along with that report, the detailed information in that photo as well. So the great thing about the Citizen Problem Manager application is that I can use this now to begin to take action on this report. And so I can simply come in now and begin to edit it. And one of the key things I can do is if that report maybe had some explicit information in it or information that I thought was sensitive, I can mark it not publicly viewable if I wanted to. I can also then begin to change the status. So the citizen sees what the status of that report is, and we'll go ahead and mark it received, and then ultimately begin to assign this the appropriate agency within my organization to take action on it. And so really you can think of the Citizen Problem Manager solution as a traffic cop who's reviewing all of the problem types that are or all the problems that are being reported, going through and assigning them to the appropriate folks within your organization. And it's a simple way to begin to take action on that. And in a few minutes, when Allison shares with you some of the work we're doing to extend these workflows, you'll see how that can come to life in the organization. The final configuration I want to show you is a complementary dashboard configuration that goes along with the Citizen Problem Reporter and Citizen Problem Manager solution. And this allows you to really kind of monitor the number of open complaints you're actively working in your community. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and take a look. There's the blight issues and the report that we just made a few minutes ago. And I can see now at any point in time the latest reports that are coming in for our community. I can see the type of report that's being made and the types of challenges we're having, and then ultimately how many open issues we have in the community. And as I begin to page through each of these forms, you'll see that they're really organized around the different types of problem reports. And so you could envision a dashboard like this running potentially in the mayor's office, or maybe within your call center if you have a 311 style call center, or more focused configurations of this dashboard running in each of the operational departments that are responsible for these individual problem types. And so perhaps within Public Works or the Road Commission at the county level, you'd see the road problems. And planning, you might see blight issues. And then ultimately in the water utility, you may see the water and sewer problems and the challenges they're wrestling with there. So that was a quick overview of the Citizen Problem Reporter solution that is available on the ArcGIS for Local Government Solutions site. And you'll see that as you begin to dig into the solution site documentation, you'll see what I showed you today was all of the Try It Live configurations we have for this application right out of the box. And when you deploy this in your organization, you'll see you really get three applications. You get the Problem Reporter application, which is designed for the general public, the Citizen Problem Manager, which is organized around the folks inside your organization who are triaging those problems, and then ultimately the dashboard, a set of maps that help you organize the problem reports, and then ultimately a whole series of layers that help you organize the content for those problems that are being reported by the general public in your community. And then when you begin to get started, what you'll see is there really are two ways that you can deploy this solution. You can begin to take advantage of the automated deployment tools that we have, which I'll show you in a minute, or you can begin to configure this by walking through a series of manual steps. So let me just wrap up with kind of how you can use the new solution deployment tool to deploy this quickly in your organization. So a few months ago, we introduced this this new ArcGIS Solutions deployment tool, and it's an add-in to ArcGIS Pro if you haven't seen it. And ultimately, what it does is provide essentially a one-click deployment for all of the solutions that we provide currently. And what you can do is essentially once you install the add-in, you'll see that it loads a new button on your Share tab, and it walks you through a series of steps to deploy the solution in your organization. The first thing you'll want to do is sign into your ArcGIS organization, the portal that you want to lay down the content in, and then ultimately walk through the steps to actually find the solution you're interested in and begin to deploy it in your organization. So in this case, I'm just going to search for Citizen Problem Reporter in the list, and you'll see that all three of those solutions that I showed you today are available. And you can select one or more of these solutions, and then ultimately identify a folder within your content you'd like to load it into and click deploy. When you're done, it'll create for you in your ArcGIS organization all of the feature layers, all of the maps, and all of the groups and applications that are necessary to run the Citizen Problem Reporter application that I showed you earlier. And then finally, once you've deployed it in your organization, you can then walk through a series of steps to configure the solution. So you may want to add additional fields to the solution, to the layers that we provide. Perhaps you want to track a report ID, or you want to add some additional information about the resolution of that problem. You can quickly begin to modify those feature layers to do that. You can also then, maybe you want to configure the domains. Maybe you have a different set of problem types that you'd like to collect in each of those feature layers. And so you can use the steps here to modify the domains and essentially change the problem types to do that. And then finally, once you've finished that, you can begin to go through a process. In this case, you don't really need to do that because in theory, you'd be probably sharing this information with the public and begin to capture new data, but in some cases you can actually load the source data you have as well into the offering and begin to take advantage of it. And so it's a real simple way for you to take advantage of the solutions that we have available and quickly deploy them in your organization. So that was a quick overview of the Citizen Problem Reporter solution right out of the box, so to speak. Let me pause for a minute, Heather, before I turn it over to Allison and see if we have some questions on the solution as it's delivered.
Sure. There was one question kind of regarding the release.
Okay.
There's a question about if there's going to be any updates to the community event apps at all.
There was not, and so the question is, were there any updates to the community events solutions in the March release? The answer is no, there was not. We are starting to work on some new offerings for community events, specifically around event operations and event planning, but those are still a ways off and probably won't be available until late this year.
Okay. Cassidy had a question. Is there any way to set up email notifications to staff once issues are submitted, or do they have to be manually assigned? Which I think Allison is going to be covering.
Yes, yeah, that's a good question, Cassidy. Yeah, it's a great segue into Allison's talk in a few minutes. Absolutely, we'll touch on that for sure.
Okay. And Becky had a question. Can this, I'm assuming, apps be used with our server and our own website, or does it need to be deployed on ArcGIS Online?
So the applications, Crowdsource Reporter and Crowdsource Manager, which are the fundamental apps that we're configuring to do this, are delivered in ArcGIS Online and Portal for ArcGIS. So you can download the content and stand it up on your own web servers as well too, the applications themselves. But the easiest way to do it is to actually deploy it right inside of either ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS. But you could, if you wanted to, download it and extend them even further and host them on your own servers.
And I'll add to that, even if you're using them hosted in ArcGIS Online, you can still use your own server hosted layers in those web maps.
That's correct.
You can any other web map.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so the content can live right on premise or online. The apps can do that as well.
Okay. Tim had a question, how easy does this front end interface with other CRM apps?
So that's a good question too, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I think.
Okay.
So I think what Tim's asking is, can I use Citizen Problem Reporter as kind of a citizen gateway into my maintenance management system, or other maybe kind of activity tracking systems I have inside my organization?
Okay. Another question from Patrick, how does the deploy add-in in Pro add the featured data sets for the Citizen Problem Reporter? Does it link to an enterprise geodatabase or a default installed file geodatabase?
So what the solution deployment tool does is actually create hosted feature layers in your ArcGIS Online organization or your portal for ArcGIS or ArcGIS Enterprise data store. And so if you have a federated data store, it will work, but it does deploy layers. It doesn't deploy geodatabase features or feature classes. They're
Okay.
feature layers that exist online or in your ArcGIS Enterprise implementation.
Okay. And Alan had a question, do citizens need an ArcGIS Online account to use Citizen Problem Reporter?
Nope, absolutely not. They, as you saw, I logged in with 0 credentials. I came in essentially anonymously. You can configure the application to use social media credentials as well too, if you'd like, and then ultimately where you saw the arcgis.com login, that's really designed for knowledge workers or field workers in your organization when you want them to report problems, and identify those problems kind of as a trusted source with their credentials.
And when you configure the application, you can choose which of those sign-in options you would like to present to the public. So you can turn off the ArcGIS sign-in. You can also turn off guest if you want to force people to go in through their social media credentials. You can choose which social media platforms you'd like. We currently support Twitter, Facebook, and Google+.
Yep.
That's all the questions for now.
Okay, so let me turn it over to Allison, and she can drill a little deeper into some of the workflows that everyone was asking about. Go ahead, Allison.
Okay. Let me just get my screen share going. Are you guys seeing a giant question mark?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start with a giant diagram that we're going to go through piece by piece here, kind of illustrating the whole workflow. So this part over here that you're currently seeing in black is basically a diagram of the workflow that Scott just demonstrated. The public comes in through Citizen Problem Reporter, creates a problem report, and then that is reviewed and managed by the operations manager using Citizen Problem Manager and Operations Dashboard. But realistically, this isn't the full life cycle of a service request for many organizations, and as we just heard from the questions. So as the local government team, we've been hearing many requests to support these supplemental workflows that will help to flesh out the rest of this cycle. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in my half of today's presentation. The first and most popular request we've had is for some way of doing email notifications. Constituent engagement relies very heavily on communication. If you're not constantly providing feedback to the people who are providing you information, then it's easy for them to stop feeling like they're being heard. And also for communication within the organization. How do you let somebody know that they have an issue has come in that they need to take a look at and possibly resolve? So we're working on a Python script that will basically enable this capability, and we're looking to have this one out sometime later in 2017, and you'll be able to configure it in several different ways to support both the communication back to the public and the communication internal to your organization. The second Python script that we're going to be working on is one to moderate content. We have version 1 of this is actually already available on the solution site. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it right now because we're going to dig much deeper into that shortly. Scott demonstrated that there's a manual way of moderating reports currently in Crowdsource Reporter and Manager, but we recognize that manual moderation only goes so far. There are certain terms that we all know that we don't necessarily want visible in a public-facing application, and it would be nice if we could hide those immediately rather than having to have somebody sitting in front of a computer manually changing yeses to nos and nos to yeses based on the content that comes in. So we have a script that will help you do that as well. The third script is geographic assignment. Scott also touched a little bit on this in his presentation. It can be really frustrating for citizens to figure out who to report content to. Organizationally, a lot of that assignment is based on geography, but citizens don't really care if a pothole is located on a town road or a county road or a state road. They just want the pothole fixed and want to tell somebody about it. So this geographic assignment tool will allow you to assign or redirect or basically just provide attributes to that service request as it comes in based on where it is located, so that you can use Citizen Problem Reporter as a single point of entry for your citizens into reporting issues, and then who actually needs to resolve it on the back end. That they don't need to be exposed to that. The fourth script is another one that we already have version 1 available on the solution site, and this is one for generating IDs. So obviously issues need to be tracked internally, and once they're brought into your CMMS system, they're assigned an ID, and you're dealing with that internally. But the public also needs some way of identifying their report. The pothole I reported on Rose Street only gets them so far when they call in for follow-up information. So this is a tool that will generate an ID in format of your choice on each report as it's created. And then you can choose to expose that back to the public, or even import that into your own CMMS system and use that as an ID going forward as well. The last one I'm going to talk about opens up this whole web over here on the right-hand side. And this is a way of taking that issue that's come in from the public, that problem report, and really pushing it through the rest of the workflow. So the diagram I'm showing here uses our ArcGIS tools. So this is how you would take that problem report, use it to create a workforce assignment in the layers that Workforce for ArcGIS uses, and then shove that through dispatcher so an operations manager can assign it, push it out into collector so that field workers are actually working with that feature out in the field after using those communication channels we discussed earlier to notify the public once the field workers have resolved that, to notify other people internal to your organization that that issue has been resolved so that future work can continue. So this diagram illustrates, I feel, a little bit more fully the entire life cycle of that service request as it comes in. And we are, as you've seen here, actively working to fill in some of those gaps. We have moderate content and generate ID are already released on the solution site. And these other three, actually there's 4, there's one more I'd like to mention here. We're illustrating the ArcGIS workflow here, but we're also working with business partners and other organizations to create links into other systems. Most notably right now is CityWorks. We're working on a script that they demonstrated at their user conference in December for how to take a problem report out of Citizen Problem Reporter and shove that into the CityWorks databases so that it can be managed on their maintenance management system on the back end. So those 4 scripts, including the CityWorks one, are all expected to be public and available for your use later this year. So with that, let's go take a look at those 2 scripts. And as we go through this, I'm also going to show you where those other scripts that aren't written yet, that we're just in the early stages of designing, will fit into this whole workflow. So like Scott, I'm going to start back in Citizen Problem Reporter. I'm going to show you what it looks like in desktop mode. He worked in smartphone mode. Mm-hmm. And as I go through, I've made a few different configuration tweaks to this as we go through. What he was demonstrating was what you'd get if you laid down the application straight out of the box using those solution deployment tools. And I've gone in and taken that configuration a little bit further by updating the application configuration and some of the map structure. So like Scott, I'm going to go in as a guest, but you'll see I have social media credentials available down here at the bottom. And like I mentioned when I was answering questions earlier, you can choose to turn on or off any of these 5 options. So I'm also going to go in as a guest. And in this case, I'm going to come in and report an animal control problem. And you'll notice that the text that's displaying for each of these already existing issues is a little bit different. This is coming from the pop-up title for each of these features in the map. And I have updated it to also show the status of the issue and a report ID. So to start off with, we're going to focus on how we got this report ID generated. I'm going to come in and submit a new report. Let's say there's a barking dog. I'm just going to complain that it's loud, and you'll notice that in this case I don't have any required fields in here, saving me a little bit of typing in front of all of you. And I'll click report it. Okay, so that issue's been reported, and you'll notice it doesn't have an ID yet. I have a script that I have located. It's just on my C drive right now. You'd obviously probably stand this up on a server. And I have this set up to run through Windows Task Scheduler. I've created a task that points at that script. And this is just a Python script with a few configuration options in it. And right now I have this script set up only to run manually, but you could set this up to run on any schedule you'd like and repeat on any interval you'd like. So you could set this up to run, for example, every 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes, any new issues that have come in will have an ID assigned to them. And it takes a minute, so I'm just going to send that off while we take a look in at this script. So here, there's only just this little section in here that I'd like you to focus on right now. Here is where I'm specifying the layer that I would like to assign IDs to. I'm also specifying the field that I would like those IDs written to. And I'm going to skip over sequence name for a minute and come down to pattern. This is where you can choose and define what pattern you would like this ID generated in. Things like object ID or GUIDs can be very hard for the public to understand. Object IDs can change if you copy features around. So this allows you to define an ID and a pattern of your choosing that will increment in value. So in this case, I want my IDs to have the pattern AC, animal control, dash, and then here is a 4-digit incrementing number. It's 4 digits because I've specified this string in here, and there's some documentation up above and on the solution site for how you'd structure that. If I just had this as empty curly braces here, it would give me the values AC-1, AC-2, AC-3. But because I've put that in here, it will give me AC-0001 just to give me a more consistent formatting of those IDs. And the script is going to keep track of where those values are so that it's consistently incrementing every time the script runs by using the sequence name. So here I've defined it as cat1, and what that's actually referencing is a row in this CSV table. So here you'll see I have cat1. The cat1 sequence increments in intervals of 1, and the next value it uses is 4, which means that the feature that I just created when I ran that task will be AC-0003 because it's the last one it would have used. I can update this interval, perhaps if I wanted it to update by 10, and if it started at 0, then my values would be 0, 10, 20, 30 would be what would increment in that portion of the ID. So you have a tremendous flexibility in the structure that you would like to use for those IDs and how you'd like them to increment. So let's go take a look in my Citizen Problem Manager application. That script has run now and it will have generated an ID for that report. So here's my barking or noisy dog report, and when I click on it, we'll see that it has been assigned the value AC-0003. And if I went back and refreshed my reporter application, you'd see the same ID visible there for the public's reference in the future as well. So as well as the updates that I made to the reporter configuration, I've made a few additional ones in Manager that I'd like to focus on. One is I've configured search on this animal control map, so I can search by report ID. So let's say it's easy to find the one I'm looking for here with 3, but let's say I had 200 reports in here and I knew that I was looking for report AC3. I could come in and search for it and it would take me directly to that one. Or perhaps what I really wanted was to look for all of the barking or noisy dog reports, and I've set up a filter on the web map that allows me to come in and search for specific problem types or filter on specific problem types. And I've defined similar filters on several of the fields to see everything with a little filter icon by it as a filter. So I can show only the ones that are publicly visible. I can search for reports that are only assigned to one person or that have a particular status. And you can set up filters like that on any field. They're just filters in the web map that are set to ask for values. That's the only difference. Okay, so that's how an ID could be generated for each report. You can set that up again on any schedule that you'd like. So now let's talk about moderating reports. So Scott demonstrated doing the manual moderation, but sometimes you need something that's a little bit quicker and doesn't require a person sitting there. So I'm going to come back and submit a blight problem now in this reporter app. There aren't any in there yet. I'm going to submit graffiti, and I'm going to type in here that this is a suspected gang sign that's been written on the side of this building. Again, I'm just going to skip over all of that for speed, click a place on the map, and submit this report. Depending on where you live, various gang signs can be controversial, and you may not want a map of where they are out there for the whole public to see, even though you need to know about this report internally. So in this case, I've set up a second task here called Moderate Reports. And this is a Python script that will comb through any newly submitted reports and look for specific terms, specific phrases, specific combinations of letters, and flag them. It will actually just do what Scott did, which was update that public view yes field to say public view no. So it's the same workflow, it's just not requiring a person to sit there and actually toggle those values. So let's take a quick look at that script. So here what we're going to do, I'm going to walk through this one a little bit more than I did the update IDs, but it works very similarly. It's going to run through Windows Task Scheduler. You're going to come in and specify the URL of the service that you would like to moderate. And the script is only going to comb, for speed reasons, it's only going to comb new reports that have a value in the status field of submitted. So these are ones that haven't been previously reviewed by somebody in your organization. And it's going to look at values in the public view field, and it's only going to look at ones that are currently visible. And if certain terms are found, it will flag them to no. Okay. And then optionally, if you want, you can specify a reason field, and that will write out why this, that will write out the reason that any reports have been toggled from visible yes to visible no. So if we scroll down a little bit, we talked about the current status value that's being combed for the visible values, and down here we get to the fun part. So we have 3 categories that you can comb for. The first one will look for, in this case, any word that has G-A-N-G in it. So it will catch gang, it will catch ganging, it will catch ganged, and it will catch any, it's not case sensitive, so you can have mixed caps and lowercase in there. The second set is exact bad words. There are some words that some combinations of letters that used alone are inappropriate, whereas if they exist inside a larger word, they're not. So you can specify exact combinations of letters in here, and it will only flag instances where that is found surrounded by white space. And finally, we have a third category here. So not all moderation occurs because of inappropriate content. Some of it, we've heard from people, occurs because of sensitive content. Gang is actually an example of that, and I probably should move that down to sensitive. Another instance that we've heard is people who are reporting homeless encampments. You don't necessarily want to make those locations publicly known in case negative action is taken. And another one is in a different space, looking at citizen science requests, locations of things like endangered species. You don't necessarily want those to be made public, even though they're not inappropriate. So if you want to differentiate between inappropriate and sensitive content, that's where this reason field can come in. And basically all that does is the script will write out to that reason field why it was flagged, if it was flagged because it was inappropriate or flagged because it was sensitive. And another thing that all of these lists will take into consideration is letter substitutions, commonly used to get around spam filters or around inappropriate word filters. So for example, because gang is listed here under bad words, it would also catch G@NG because the @ is commonly used to substitute for the letter A. And you can update this list to reflect what you're finding in your community. We've just included the most common substitutions here. Okay, so I had submitted that report. I meant to run this earlier, so we'll just have to take a second here to pause while that one runs. And then we can, I'm actually going to refresh the reporter application while that runs since I have a minute. So again, this is just running through Windows Task Scheduler. You can set this script up to run on whatever frequency you'd like. It's not going to moderate reports instantly as they're submitted, but you can set this to run on a pretty tight loop so that any content that comes in will be evaluated within a few minutes of it appearing on the site, and you can then, the script will choose to take it down. And you can use this in conjunction with the manual mode. So perhaps it flags something as inappropriate or sensitive and you've reviewed it and decided it's not really. You can easily turn it back on using the Crowdsource Manager workflow. Okay, I think that's finished running now. So if we come back in and look at blight problems, you'll notice that it is not showing any features found, even though we did just submit one. And that's because it's been filtered out for having the word gang in it. But if I come over to Manager, it's not like it's deleted that feature. There's still a record of it, and it still exists in the layer. So here I have it accessible to me in Manager, and I could come in here, for example, and toggle this back on to yes, and then it would reappear in the Crowdsource Reporter application. Or I can choose to funnel this off into my CMMS. So all of the other scripts that I mentioned when we were looking at the slides will function in a similar way. So the email notification tool, geographic assignment, and handing this off to your CMMS, all of those scripts will be Python scripts that you can set up in Windows Task Scheduler that will, in the case of email notifications, fire off emails. If somebody had included an email in their report, you could choose to send an email back to them. You can also tie these two together very nicely, the geographic assignment with the email notification. So based on what geography the report has been submitted in, choose to who you would like to fire an email off to. All the geographic assignment is going to do is basically a point in Polygon, which is if the service request exists within a specific jurisdiction, update an attribute on that service request to reflect either who it should be assigned to or that geography. And then the Create Workforce Assignment tool or the CityWorks are a little bit more complicated in that they're actually taking features from the layer you're seeing in Citizen Problem Reporter and copying those attributes to either create a new feature in the Workforce layer or to create a new entry in the CityWorks database or the other CMMS database. But the basic premise of all of them is the same. They'll all be Python scripts that you can schedule to run on an interval of your choice. So where can you get these? The two that are currently available, Generate IDs and Automated Moderation, as I mentioned, are currently available from the solution site under Crowdsource Reporter. They're not yet available under the Citizen Problem Reporter help, so you'll need to branch over to the Crowdsource Reporter to get these right now. We are planning on adding the documentation for how you get and how you stand up both of these scripts to all of the solutions that use Crowdsource Reporter for the summer release of ArcGIS Online and of the solution site. So they will be available there soon, but for now, just search for Crowdsource Reporter and you'll find them there. And the road ahead for these, I think we've covered it pretty comprehensively already, is to develop, document, and ship all of these complementary scripts that I've talked about. And in looking even further out into the future, is to evolve the solution to incorporate other CMMS platforms. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions on these scripts or our plans for these scripts, or if there's anything else that you would like me to share. Heather?
Sure. Kenneth just commented that they were able to use Event Server to set up their email notifications as well. So,
yeah, Geo Event Server is a great option, especially if you're already using it in your organization. It is kind of a sledgehammer for a thumbtack requirement, though. It's a huge tool, and standing it up can be a lot of work, but it is extremely powerful, and you can actually accomplish all of these tasks with Geo Event Server already. We're just looking to provide more targeted and easier to stand up solutions for these very minor, they're actually very minor tasks that we're looking to accomplish. But yeah, if you've got Geo Event Server, go for it.
Okay, we do have a question. Hari, I think that's how you pronounce your name. Is the Generate ID based on captured time or day of the feature and or global ID?
No, it's based on whether or not a feature has an ID already. If it doesn't have an ID will be assigned, and they're assigned in the order that they've come in. So they will be, the IDs will be assigned in chronological order, based on, I'm guessing it's the object ID. It's just in chronological order of what they came in, but it's not relying on a date field or anything like that. It's just processing them in the order that they appear in the service.
Okay. Mike has a question. Can you reverse of yes/no settings can be done? All entries are invisible unless they pass the filter or are made visible?
Yeah, absolutely. So how that's working in Reporter, to dig a little bit further into the layers right now. In the feature layer that you're seeing in Crowdsource Reporter, there's a public view field that has a default value of yes. The Reporter map has a filter on it that says only show features where the value is yes. So that works. As soon as a feature is submitted, it displays in the map. But you can change the default value on that field to no. And then any feature, any report that comes in will be hidden by default because it doesn't meet the map filter requirements. But if you were to toggle the value of the field in Manager, then it would appear.
Okay, cool. Tim has a question. Are the icons and descriptions on the Citizen Problem Reporter configurable? Can we create our own icons?
Yeah, absolutely. In this case, the icons you're seeing here are just the map thumbnails, and you can choose any graphic you would like for that. The icons that you're seeing on the map are just chosen from the symbol picker, and you can make those whatever you'd like as well.
Cool. Kenneth has a question. Can you display the report and the type, but hide the photos from appearing?
There isn't a way to do that right now, but that's a very interesting idea.
Okay.
For now, if the report is visible, any attachments on that report are also visible.
Okay. Charles has a question. Can the Python scripts be placed on a local desktop PC? Does it need to stay on all of the time?
It would need to stay on all of the time that you wanted the scripts to run. If you're running them on a local machine and the machine is turned off, the scripts can't run. I would recommend putting them on a machine, especially for something like moderation. If you want moderation to run around the clock, I would recommend posting the scripts someplace that the machine won't be turned off.
Okay. Spencer has a question. Could you anonymize requests rather than hiding them so citizens can be sure that their submission came in, but still hide if necessary?
I'm not sure I'm completely understanding that question, so I'm going to give it the best answer I can. Please reply with more information if I don't quite answer what you're looking for. So when I submit a report in here to animal control problems, this form is being driven by the editable fields in the pop-up configuration. And the information that's displayed here is being controlled by the visible fields in the pop-up configuration. And those two things don't need to be the same. So you'll notice that here, it's not showing my name, even though when I submit a report, it asks for a name. So I'll do another request in here. I'll put in another barking dog there, and I'll put my name in here, my phone number, and my email. Just to show you that none of this information comes through in the submitted report. So when I report that, I can come back here and look. So here's the barking noisy dog one that doesn't have an ID that I just submitted. All you can see is my details and the time that it was submitted. None of that personal contact information is visible here. It is technically visible from the REST endpoint because I haven't locked it down in the case of this application. But if you go to the solution site, we do have instructions on how to lock it down to completely protect that information if you're collecting personal data and really want to be rigorous in your protection of it.
Okay.
Okay, so it's visible, but there's no personal info. I hope that answers the question. Please send Heather more info if it doesn't.
Yeah, he responded, yeah, it covers what I had in mind, like hiding comments which might be sensitive while still showing a point.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great. Kenneth has a question. Is there a way to hide comments until they are vetted, which is kind of same
Yeah, so I
topic?
think I've answered that one already. It's just changing the default value on the layer in that field from yes to no would allow you to use the rest of the solution how it's configured by default.
Okay. Jason has a question. Scripts on local machine running in task schedule will run if the computer is locked in quotation marks overnight.
That will depend on how you set up the task. There are different options in here for how this is. So you can say run only when the user's logged on, or run whether the user is logged on or not. I believe that if you say logged on or not and save credentials with it, it will still run if the machine is locked, but it will not run if it's hibernated, sleeping, or powered off. Check the Windows documentation for that to be positive or tested, obviously, before you tried that.
Okay. Kenneth has another question. Isn't comments a separate table, the comments by voting after the point is visible?
Right, so that's this comments button, which I really didn't touch on very much. Scott did a little bit. So these end up being related records in a table that's related to this feature layer. So you can set up the same type of moderation on these comments as you can on the features themselves by putting in I believe there may already be a public view field in the comment table, and basically setting it up the same way with default yes or default no will determine whether comments are visible immediately or only after moderation. And you can handle those the same way in Citizen Problem Manager. Here, let me submit one. I don't believe I have the moderation set up with the filters and everything on the web map, but I can show you editing. Which table was I in here? Yeah. So through Crowdsource Manager, you can edit those related records just the same as you can edit the features. So if I come in here, I have a public view field that I can choose yes or no on, and set a filter up on my reporter map to only show ones that say yes. In this case, I don't have it fully configured to support that workflow right now, but I think you can see where I'm headed with that.
Yeah, he seems pretty happy with your answer. So yes, yes, for sure. That's all of the questions for now.
Okay.
Did you have anything else to add, Scott?
No, I think that's good. Allison, do you want to just talk a little, I think you did cover it, but we had one slide to summarize the, let's just stay on your machine and just wrap up with that one slide, if you don't mind. It summarizes all the.
Sure, you're cutting in and out a little bit, Scott.
Yeah, I know. There you go.
This one? Okay, you're cutting in and out. So
why don't you cover it then?
So just the road ahead is getting out these scripts, one for email notification, Workforce and CityWorks integration to kind of help push these service requests through the rest of their life cycle, and geographic assignment to allow you to support more than one geography or more than one jurisdiction through the same application. I'm not sure what else you're looking for there, Scott.
Nope, that's good. Sorry,
Okay.
I was just, internet's breaking up. I mean, the other thing I'll offer is that we are certainly working with other CMMS providers.
Yeah.
And we'll work with any. So if you don't, if we haven't mentioned the one that you use specifically in your organization, certainly reach out to us and we'll let you know where we're at. And any kind of feedback you give that vendor will certainly help us drive that work too.
Good. Okay, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thanks for joining us, everybody. We look forward to seeing and hearing from you at our next meetup, which will be Thursday, April 20th, which will be providing an overview of public access applications for assessment and tax organizations. So until then, have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.